it's hard to think that it's actually a year ago that we got a brand new album from Say Anything, because it feels like it was just yesterday. I mean, and this album came as a total surprise and shock. I went somewhere, I think I went out to eat or something, and I came back and all of a sudden people are talking about a brand new Say Anything album. And they had been talking about it for a while. Max Bemis had been talking about going into the studio and making these songs and writing these songs kind of pretty much since Hebrews released in 2014, but it kind of built up more in the end of 2015 and into 2016. However, the way he was talking really kind of left the impression that they were going to release an album kind of in the summer, maybe the early fall kind of era, but what we ended up getting was in January just a album out of the blue, no notice, no build up, no singles, no nothing, just suddenly there is an album called I Don't Think It Is. Now, this album really kind of not just caught me off guard because of the surprise release, but also because of how he really went back and kind of tried to capture, I think, the essence of what people liked about Say Anything. And that's kind of how I felt about Hebrews in a lot of ways. But Hebrews was a bit of an experimentation for them, especially the fact that there were no guitars on that entire album. It was all just done with electronic work and with other instruments that you really don't hear, especially in kind of indie rock music in general. And I felt it worked fairly well, especially with the songwriting. I mean, Max Bemis' songwriting is just absolutely fantastic. His lyricism is amazing. His ability to kind of just write a track that just flows so well is just really not something that other people have. And I don't think it is kind of continues that. It brings back the guitars. I feel like that actually is a huge part of this. Now, Hebrews wasn't lacking because it didn't have any guitars, but I just think that I don't think it is really brought the guitars forefront and just really capture the essence. I mean, one of the best things about, and one of the reasons why people like Is a Real Boy so much is just because of the just off-the-wall guitar riffs that are there, the weird breakdown parts that they have just randomly thrown throughout. It just felt like it was a lot of just off-the-wall randomness, I guess, is the best way to put it. I think a lot of people kind of connected with that a bit, and I think this really goes back to it. I mean, it starts off with the song Give a Damn, which all in all is a little bit one of the weaker songs on here. It kind of travels that line between pop punk and indie rock. It has that kind of cool chorus that he did with, I believe he had fans submit their vocal tracks and incorporated that into this song, and I think that actually works on this song. The song 21 Coked Up and Speeding is probably one of my favorite ones. He's kind of going back through his history and telling his story from his perspective, and it's actually interesting to hear it. But it's also definitely a good song to listen to. Rum kind of has this, again, very, very kind of poppy vibe to it, but experimental pop. I wouldn't, not so much radio. It's definitely kind of got that bouncy flow to it, but it's never anything, it's not heavy, it's not rock so much, but again, I enjoy it. You also have some weird kind of experimental songs on here. Varicose Visage, for instance, is one of those. Attaboy is another one, which is a very, very long track that kind of splits itself from the beginning to the middle, and then it kind of ends with just weird kind of vocal screaming. I forgot who did it. It's not Bax doing it, but it goes from kind of upbeat punk influence indie rock to just slower the stylings towards the end of that song. I think this album really holds up on, honestly, it's probably one of the best albums simply just because it's completely emotionally raw. It feels like they just went into the studio and just produced an album and that was it, that they didn't really go back and say, well, we need to fix this, we need to tweak this, we need to do this. I feel like they kind of just let it out and that's what came out of it. And there's a lot of guest work on here as well that I think added to that. It's not quite as guest heavy as Hebrews or In Defense of the Genre, for instance, but there are some pretty big names on here. It's just overall, I really think they did an excellent job with the album, and I think that's why it does hold up 1 year later, and I'm still listening to it. I still have a lot of these tracks that I'm going back to, but I mean, it really is one of their better albums that they've done. And I think a lot of people who maybe have kind of fallen off with them, especially people who are just purist and fans only of Is a Real Boy, which to me is nonsense, but whatever. If that's the case, I think you are going to like this album and find something that you like in this album that kind of drew you to them in the first place, because it does kind of strip away a lot of the pure fuzz that was there in some of their albums through, for instance, from In Defense of the Genre, or their self-titled album, or even Hebrews, for instance. It kind of just strips that all away, and we get something pure. But it absolutely does stand the test of time, so I don't think it is 1 year later. Definitely check it out. It's still a great album. I'm still listening to it.